Jacob Volnievich again. I want to kind of go further with talking about how in week 7 of the HCI Big Data course, we looked at one of the tweets we collected and kind of shared what was interesting about it. And I guess I kind of want to just kind of think through and kind of grow upon like what makes a tweet interesting and what are kind of, I think, even harder than that is what is hard about collecting tweets. So beyond the code that collects a ton of tweets every day, is that you get them in batches of 100 in a JSON object. In a JSON object. And the JSON objects are not easy to read by yourself. But especially when collecting one tweet, you initially don't really want to maybe create a parser right then to kind of go through and parse it, even though eventually you will need to. So I guess it could create the point that, well, you might as well do it then. But I think, so the levels of difficulty for parsing for interesting tweets or tweets with good information has multiple levels, and one of them, so the first level is just JSON with 100 objects stored in that one JSON object, or 100 subclasses or whatever. It's hard to parse visually. And then you also need to go in and see, okay, are these tweets actually relevant? Like, I've been collecting tweets on the Microsoft Surface, and one of the things that I've had a hard time on is people will sometimes, there might be the tweet that says, ow, just hit my head on a hard surface, and it will be hashtag Surface, which obviously isn't relevant to the Microsoft Surface tablet that I'm interested in when comparing to the Google Nexus and iPads. So I think that's a hard thing also, is are the tweets relevant, which visually that's an easier thing compared to the JSON, but when parsing, the JSON will be easier, but the actual relevance will be harder. Another thing is kind of the emotions are, in the tweets you kind of need to read the text and see, is this a tweet that shows great interest in the Surface? Does it show anger? Does it show kind of a mocking opinion? And then another thing is kind of location could have a little bit about it. If like all the really nice tweets are coming out of Redmond, Washington, where Microsoft is centered, like that's kind of a worse thing. That, I mean, that doesn't really show as much because you'd imagine that the people working on for Microsoft would be more supportive of the Surface than, say, the iPad. So location can have a little bit. And so kind of there's these multiple layers that all kind of go into trying to see, is this tweet relevant, which all kind of make it difficult. And then once you kind of have these relevant tweets, since I've been playing around with d3.js to kind of see about visualizing, and I'm also doing it for my presentation, one of the things that I think will be difficult is, how do I visualize these tweets? Is there so many ways that I could go, in so many ways that I think could apply good information, but also maybe apply kind of pointless information, or maybe there's different ways to visualize the data that could present the data in a way that would be more efficient than, let's say, other forms. So these are kind of just all my thoughts that I go through when looking at tweets, and how relevant, how useful, and how good they are. I know that these videos have been kind of open-ended, but they're just more my continuous thoughts on what we've been having to do for this HCI Big Data course. Thank you very much.